first block, when you are a farmer or a landowner, you point to the land that you want to put Miscanthus on, you put the Miscanthus in there, it grows, you harvest it for about 2 to 3 years, and then after that you can keep harvesting it every year, and the yield will be very big, very large. So at some point that is your crop and your resource that you're getting out of that ground. And then it goes on to the industry. So who takes that product, that resource that you've created, and utilizes that to make it into a ready-to-market product? That's the industry. So it always starts with transporting it from the land to the place that it needs to be in a production stage. That might be on the grounds themselves if you have a very short chain, but it usually is somewhere else. So who transports those products? It might be the customers themselves, or it might be the farmers themselves. But we often see it be either the contracting company, so the loonbedrijven such as Stuut, who brings it from A to B, or the person who will actually eventually process it to a product. So when you do need to get a storage unit involved, usually that is necessary because not every production facility has the capacity to put every resource straight in. You need to store it somewhere. So who owns the storage? It's a very important question because this might be somewhere that the business case is impacted very thoroughly. In here, it's the same as transporters, but it's something to look into when you're mapping your own chains. And then sometimes the products need to be dried. Here, the product dries on the land often. So that helps. And then at some point, it needs to be processed into a product itself. When I showed you the video and what the picture of Carbon Crush showed is that there is a very broad type of market that you can look into for this type of product. So every type of application also requires a different approach on this processing step towards the semi-finished product. So we've highlighted a few that are active in the north of the Netherlands. One would be stable litter or mulch, very easy. That's just using it as a very low value product. But when you extract lignin from Miscanthus, such as when you use it, for example, in paper, you take out the lignin, and the lignin can be used in asphalt, which will come back later on. The cellulose can be used in the paper, etc. The granules, when you want to process it, for example, to concrete, that's when for example, MCA comes in. And then it comes to the final stage of the industry, really making it into a product. In our example, it's a production material or a construction material. We see, for example, Dijkstra Drijsma, a construction company here in Friesland, who uses it as blow-in insulation. So when you start back at the storing and transporting, when you harvest it, you really mow it very thoroughly, and it becomes these very tiny fractions, and those tiny fractions can be used to blow in as a blow-in insulation material. We have Phi. They make prefab walls and ceilings from all types of crops, such as Miscanthus as well. Paper, you see it on the board, Wepa, fiber boards, bioplastics. We have a question mark there because there are many types of people many types of companies that are very interested in this. And we know that this is something that is very interesting for the business chain development, but we don't really know who can make it from it. So we have a few ideas, but you see when you map these types of things and you do think that this is very important and something that you really need to do something with, but you have a hole in your value chain, that's something that you need to work on. And this is one of those holes. Then when you go into the final stage on the construction, who applies the product? When you look at a blow-in insulation, for example, Dijkstra Drijsma, you have those types of people that make it into a product, but also the one who apply it. That's what happens with blow-in insulation. But when you look at concrete, which is something that we think is very high potential here in this region, you need the final processing from parties such as BioBound. Annemieke also mentioned Siriton. BioBound is a different type of company that is involved in making concrete from Miscanthus, using it as a filling, for example.
And they sell a lot of products market ready yet.
Yeah, exactly. So they already apply it in many stages. And the only way that this would work is when you really look at the value chain as a whole. And I'll get back into that later on in a bit, because this is one of the key takeaways from this mapping. You see infrastructure companies that can really apply, for example, in asphalt, use it into the roads, architects, that gear, you see them on the screen. And then it goes to who owns the building that the material is applied in. That can be private house owners when you look at blow-in insulation, but when you look at other types of applications, looking at infra, for example, you need to think about real estate developers or governments that really own the grounds that these infrastructures are laid on. Those are the people that eventually use the products that are made from this value chain.
And those are the companies that are the demanding parts that we need in this value chain.
So this is a really important part of the value chain. Who buys it, who actually pays for it in the end, and who makes it so that every stage of this value chain can be paid at certain stages. Then the exploitation. This is a very interesting part of the value chain thinking, because exploitation is not always someone who also really participates in the process from land selection all the way up to processing materials in the realized building. When you look at the private house owners, for example, these people, they buy a product. They're not really involved in all these stages that come before, but they use that product for a long time. When you look at social housing companies, that's even more interesting, because the social housing companies, they apply a product in their home, but they don't use the home themselves. That's the rental. That's the before. When you are making these types of value chains, you really need to envision what type of user is going to eventually feel and look at this product every day, because that impacts the choices and the design choices that you make. Then at the end of life, there comes a reuse stage. When you look at Miscanthus, such as blow-in insulation, if you don't need to process it too much, you might be able to use it as you see government greenkeeping, for example. When you look at the infra, this is something that is very interesting, because you can reuse the product. For example, when you look at the reuse stages of these products in farm areas, you might be able to use it as mulch again. All these types of applications are possible. And then something that is not in the top corner or in the top of the screen, but is very important, is basically the basis. This is where value chain thinking comes in as well. The basis on which these models can grow. And that's on the bottom of the screen. You see all these yellow, is it yellow? You see the yellowy squares.
Sort of yellow.
Yeah. So who is involved throughout the bio-based value chain? That would be farmers and traders. They're basically everywhere on this chain. Who spreads knowledge? Those are the farmers and traders as well, but also organizations such as national parties, such as Building Balance, parties such as the one that I work for, the Circulair Friesland Association, Circulair Groningen Drenthe Association. These are associations that really want to spread knowledge on these types of materials. And you see building, which is very focused on just all these innovation types, all these things of developing you can actually say that better than I can, I think, on why building is also a party that really conducts research, spreads knowledge, etc.
Yeah.
So maybe you can just give a quick example of that.
Building is a company in Groningen, and it tests and validates new materials, also Miscanthus.
Exactly.
So they don't make it market ready, but they're involved in the steps before that in the testing and validation. You just talked about these demanders of the chain. One of the biggest how you say it, instead of linear thinking in this circular model, we also talk about risk, the spread of risk. So if the demander wants to build real healthy buildings, because with all those materials we build healthy buildings, and if they want to build them, then they also need the crops to be grown. And you just saw this film with Reind. He told he wanted to grow the crops for building materials. Well, we can say that the crop in the first year, it's all gone. It didn't work out, so he bears all the risks, the financial risk as a farmer. And within a circular value chain model, it's not only his risk, because if the company that makes the production material, if they want to sell this so the building owner can build a healthy home, it's not only the risk of the farmer to be taken by the farmer. So we need to research a new business model in which those risks are spread throughout the whole chain.
Yeah, you need to carry each other here.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
And that also comes in when it comes to who finances. This is a very important question within bio-based value chain development. If it's just, for example, a regular bank, it's hard for them to think past the model that they're used to for so long and so many years that are already experienced in that. But it is very important to really look into, okay, if for example, a bank would pre-finance something, how can we bear the risk when it fails? That's something that really you need to risk or spread that risk, and also spread the gains of such a business model.
Yeah.
But if it does work, how do we spread the gains of the many in the many stages of the value chain development? So often when you come to these types of materials, they're rather new. So you need to also look into what types of barriers are right now limiting my value chain development. For example, laws and regulations. So we've put that in on who does lobbying. All participants do. But it does really spark some interesting discussion when you go into these business models, who really focuses on approaching what type of barriers are there and how can we get them out of our way. And a really important part of this is also the role of the orchestrator. So recognizing the importance of this role in linking chains together is something that we've really come into gaining the knowledge on that within the BBoBB project. So the orchestrator is a funny story. It's not on this board. At the same time, it's everywhere on this board, because being an orchestrator really requires you to have a helicopter view of this entire regional value chain, and connecting the parties that are necessary to get this value chain to a success. The role of an orchestrator is to bring these parties together, keep these parties together, and help them identify what types of barriers are currently limiting our growth, what types of things are necessary right now to be a success in 5 years, for example. These are all things that an orchestrator needs to do, and that's quite challenging. And it also is not limited to one party in the value chain, and is also dependent on time. For example, in the first few years of a value chain development, an orchestrator might be someone else than it is in a year later. You need to be able to switch in these roles. This is a very important takeaway from the BBoBB project.
And talking about time, we only have 2 minutes left. We hope that you can have another 5 minutes, so we can have a bit of a discussion.
Yeah. So just to maybe it would be wise to just give these takeaways already, and then leave the room for the last questions.
Yes.
Would that be okay, Jill?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.